This episode is brought to you by Active Digital, where we help customer-obsessed companies become destination brands. When you demand that the TPS report has a cover sheet, right? Like, consider that you might be, creating a ripple effect that causes a lot of other people's jobs to become difficult, or they wind up demanding something of the customer.
No doubt.
And all of a sudden, you've made them interacting with your company more difficult. All right, folks, today we're finishing up our book review of Getting Naked by Patrick Lencioni. We're going to be talking about the principles of naked service. Let's get into it. Do you want to decommoditize your products and services? Do you want to become a destination brand, increase your revenue, and have more control over your pricing? You're in the right place. Each week, we'll talk about how to create great customer experiences and how to orient your company to enable them. We're your hosts, Devin and David, and this is the Experience Leader Podcast. Everybody, welcome back to the show. We are here for our last piece on Getting Naked by Patrick Lencioni. Such an impactful book. I've got my good buddy David here with me. David, he's actually been down here traveling to Atlanta. He's actually based up in Virginia. I'm a little bit curious. When you come down to ATL, like what's your thought? Like how did you think about Richmond, ATL? Like what's your thought, man?
Man, I love this town. I'm always jealous of the airport. I get that it's busy. I'm just jealous that y'all can actually fly anywhere you want to fly without having to connect. But no, I love Atlanta. I always have. Super convenient to like so many cool things. But the city itself, like it's just there are so many different parts to it. Like I've always just been like super interested in like the complexity of how like the metropolitan area has built out and just like the sheer size of it and what's going on, versus like a Dallas or a Chicago or, other cities that are kind of like have similar sprawl, but in different ways. So yeah, for me, like it's good. And frankly, like the weather's way better than those places. So I'll take Atlanta any day. Love being here and love being here with you, man.
Word, man. Dude,
yeah.
Appreciate you, man. I will say that the sprawl for those of us that live here can actually be a thing that we don't like sometimes.
I know it. It's 2 days in and 2 days out. It's fine, man.
It's totally fine when that's it. But when you live here and you got to get your kid to school, you're always 20 minutes away from wherever you really need to be.
No doubt.
But that's cool, man. I hope at some point to come up to Richmond. I've been to Virginia. I've actually the only place I've ever been in Virginia is Bristol. Like legit Bristol.
I shouldn't laugh at that. That seems mean to Bristol, but the fact that like that's the only place is pretty amusing.
I've never seen anywhere else in Virginia besides Bristol.
I think we can fix that, man.
Good.
Oh man, that makes me laugh.
But so getting into talking about the book again. Obviously the title makes you chuckle. At least it makes the 12-year-old in me chuckle. But we're gonna talk about Patrick's principles of naked service, right? So we're gonna talk about a few of them. He's actually got several of them. We're gonna talk about a few of them that really stuck out to us. So like, I think you did a great job of kind of distilling some of that stuff into very usable form. But that, a lot of these things really hit home for me as I was reading the book and like seeing it in action and then him naming it. I'm like, yep. Oh yeah, heck yeah. Like, let's run through that real quick. Why don't you kind of run through the high level of it?
Yeah. So, I mean, the last week or last episode, we talked about these three fears, right? And those were kind of roll-ups of just that high-level behavior that can get in the way, right? And we talked a little bit about how to avoid that, and frankly, just like digging in a little bit to why those things can be risky and what they can cause. there's kind of a layer deeper, and the book does a good job of, in the kind of the fiction section, it does a good job of highlighting some of this through the story, and then towards the end, he kind of calls, some of these principles out that are lower level. And I agree with you. I think some of these, it's like you read it and you're like, yeah, okay, that's a thing that I have, maybe I've thought, I've internalized in some cases, maybe I've used different words, but when you start piecing them together, especially in the context of those fears and thinking about how these things kind of either come off of or lead to those fears, it's important to really think about like, okay, well, where is this impacting my business right now, right? And how can I change the way that I interact with my customers and connect with my customers based on these things? So a couple of the ones that jumped out to me, one, and we'll get into all of these, but the first was really just making everything about the customer. Kind of a no-brainer. We'll talk about it, but to me, like that was one where I was like, yes. And we even touched on that a little bit with the fears around how you can move stuff away from you, the individual, you, the organization, to your customer, right? And what that looks like. Second one was giving away the business. That always scares the hell out of people, I know. But I think that there's some really good learnings there around what that actually means. And it doesn't mean not making money, right? There's a deeper version of that.
Just want to make that clear. Yeah. It doesn't mean that you don't make money.
No doubt.
Please keep listening.
The third thing that we'll talk a little bit about is asking dumb questions. We talked a little bit about that in the last episode. I think there are some good specifics to jump into, right? It's one thing to just kind of say that and talk about why that can be helpful and why vulnerability plays in. We can get a little more specific though, I think, and talk about when dumb questions really have a compounding impact that's positive, right? So how as a leader, and as someone who is a leader in front of your customers, you can influence their behavior and the behavior of your own team by doing that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then really the last one was doing the dirty work. And I love this one. I am, I'm a huge proponent of, and, we'll talk about this a little bit, but like, I'm a believer that if you understand what your customer is intending to do, you understand their pain, and they are trusting you to help them to solve that problem, to, achieve that milestone, whatever it might be, like you do what needs to be done. Right. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how it's used. So those are kind of the four principles we're going to cover today that we pulled out from the book that I thought were particularly interesting as we drill a little bit deeper.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So the one that I kind of want to kick off with, is talking about making everything about the customer. Deceptively simple, right? People are like, yeah, no duh. Like, yeah, of course we make everything about the customer. Yeah, but do you though? But do you? That, yep. I mean, that's that's the question that I wind up asking is okay, is what we're doing right now actually in service of our customer? You can see it with internal processes. One of the things that I've, over the years tried to instill, when I'm working with a client, I'm working inside of the company is, we think about how to make our job easier. We think about how to make our internal processes easier. A lot of people don't necessarily think, especially the folks that don't, get face-to-face time with customers or, interact with customers on the front line. They don't necessarily think about how them demanding this thing be handed to them a certain way because it makes their job easier. They don't think about what that does to the customer experience. That it's not a concern that they have because it culturally in their group, it's not what it's not the imperative that is placed is they don't think about themselves as impacting the customer experience.
Yep.
It's just not something that they think is like a part of their thing. It's like, no, absolutely. Like when you demand that the TPS report has a cover sheet, right? Like consider that you might be, creating a ripple effect that causes a lot of other people's jobs to become difficult, or they wind up demanding something of the customer.
No doubt.
And all of a sudden you've made them interacting with your company more difficult. You go home earlier, but you've impacted the customer experience. It's that kind of stuff that
100%,
I think
man,
can be missed easily.
I look at it as, if you take the individual parts of your business, right, that like you said, it's a simple concept. Like, it should be built around making it about the customer. But if you take the individual teams, be it business units, parts of the org that are, running things operationally, et cetera, my thing is always like, what do you ring the bell for? Right. Because if the only thing you ever ring the bell for are things that start with I and we, and it has to do with, we landed this sale. And I'm not saying don't get excited about, it's like, listen, I've been in that part of the org for a long time. Like, I get real excited about sales. So it's not to say that isn't important, but what do you ring the bell for? Because the truth is, if your customers' wins are your wins and they're the most important wins, like, you would actually ring the bell for different things. That would come from the outside in, right? And you would be able to, and then, to your point around different groups within the org and who is quote unquote customer facing. Like, I'm gonna be honest, like, at that point, there's a lot of people that maybe don't ever get the time of day with the customer because that's not their day job, that still do things that impact, to your point, that ripple effect, or just directly empower their colleagues to do what they need to do, or empower the tech to do what it needs to do, right? Like, not everything is human to human. There's plenty of stuff that is occurring via automation. There's plenty of stuff that's occurring via software, where, customers are doing a lot of self-service, but those victories that the customer is having, those should be celebrated, right? The roll-up of those should be celebrated in a way that, frankly, we usually just reserve for our own stuff, being honest, right? So yeah, I think that there's a, and you called this out around efficiencies and all the other stuff, right? And again, like, there are efficiencies that can get you closer to that ideal of how you impact and help your customer, for sure. But there's other stuff that, frankly, like, is purposely inefficient. Like, I think of, and this was something that my family experienced directly, but then I've heard from others that they have as well. But Chewy, so the company that sells pet products,
I subscribe.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do. We had, so our family dog passed earlier last year, and I think we had maybe just ordered a new bag of dog food or something, so it hadn't even been opened yet. It was in the garage. And my wife just, we're from the old school, like, you don't put things to waste. So it was like, well, we can give it away, or can you even do that with food? And it's like, you try to figure out what you're supposed to do with it. So I think she, like, shot them an email, or maybe picked up the phone. I actually think it was an email she sent about, like, hey, should I return this? Like, what can I do with it? Or do you guys know who we can give it to? Like, and got a phone call that kind of gave her instructions on what she could do, which was basically keep it, give it to somebody that needs it. All good. Next day, flowers show up at the house for the dog.
That's awesome.
And you just think of, and I've since talked with other people. We weren't even talking about my experience, who had something happen. Either they got a new pet or pet passed or whatever it might be. And there was a client services person that took the time to send them something, with a note and the rest. And you just, like, that is like, but that's a win, and like, be honest with you, like, I didn't really care where we got stuff for the dog from, but now, like, you better believe I know where we got our first stuff from,
Absolutely.
Like, and I won't forget the fact that it was like, yeah, I guess we used Chewy for that, right? And guess who we'll be using again, So
that's right. That's exactly right.
But it's totally inefficient. Not, that doesn't cut down on time with the customer. It's the exact opposite. The person picked up the phone, made a phone call, then had to order the flowers, then had to make sure they get, but it was meaningful.
Yeah. I mean, and so the question that I always wind up wanting to ask essentially is, because, I've said the same thing, is like, well, it's not necessarily efficient, but it is impactful. Right. But I took a step back and I sort of asked myself, when we talk about efficiency, what does that mean to us?
Mm-hmm.
What, if efficiency towards what, or efficiency of what? And it really came down to, all right, let's not think about efficiency in or at least let's not just think about that efficiency in terms of, like, how I get my job done,
mm-hmm.
Or how quickly I can finish it. Right. That can lead to more impact for the business. Right.
Yep.
but it doesn't necessarily mean that. And so are we thinking about the efficiency of the ability to impact our customers positively? Because then I'm all about it. Like if we're talking about that kind of efficiency, then yeah, let's orient the business to make that easy.
There's no doubt, right? And that gets into, the metrics and the KPIs that drive behavior, right? And if those are tuned to, if we're being honest, if they're tuned to the usual, then yeah, you're trying to minimize costs. You're trying to do your job faster and faster and faster because, that drives that number down, which drives the green arrow up. And, but to your point, if the metrics and KPIs are actually tuned to the customer in the first place, then everything you can do to improve that process is value add.
Right.
And so, yeah, like you do then get those customer efficiencies, right? And yeah, I mean, the thesis, of course, is that will still in turn drive a bunch of the other KPIs that are more, calculated on the street. Like those are still going to go in the right direction. But yes, I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah. And, you think about what's going to move the green arrow up, right? Like that, ultimately it should drive the green arrow up. We know it does drive the green arrow up. Like you talked about, the experience with Chewy. You're like, yeah, that's who we're getting from next time we get another pet. That's who we're getting our food from. That stuff matters. You're affecting customer lifetime value.
100%.
There. You're affecting probably willingness to pay. You're like, for that kind of experience, essentially, you're probably willing to pay more at that point. Like I'm not willing to trade.
Yep.
Because the grocery store down the street has it for $2 cheaper. They didn't send me any flowers when my dog died.
Yep.
Like, these people clearly care. They make it easy because I don't have to go to the store, one. So that's the whole reason I probably subscribed in the first place. But now there's an emotional connection. And, there's just that there's that willingness to invest more in having the better experience that drives that green arrow.
Yep.
And we got to look at it that way.
And you're creating fans, right? We talk about that a lot on this show.
Right.
Like, is you are at that point, like people go from, they're no longer just a customer. They're no longer just somebody who's engaging in transactions. Like they become a fan of your brand, of your organization. And that is, they're out there marketing for you at that point.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's the goal, right? We talk about becoming a destination brand. That's one of the things that I talk about on the show. It's kind of what I set out to help companies do, is to become a destination brand. That's what we do at our company. What does that mean? It means as soon as I have the money, I'm spending it on you. Like we want to help people get there. And those are the kind of actions that turn you into that. And those are the companies that are more profitable, right? Like we can rattle off the usual suspects, but there's a reason why they're more profitable than their more efficient competitors.
Yep.
Because I'm not interested in how efficient you are as an organization. As a customer, I'm interested in, one, do you do the job that I hired you to do, or I hired your product to do? Two, how do you make me feel? And three, essentially, how do you change my life, right? Like, obviously going back to, do you do the job, right? Am I making progress? When we talk about jobs to be done, there's an aspect of this. I actually have to give credit to Alan Clement. He's the one who I really got exposed to this by, or through. But when somebody brings a product into their life, they're essentially trying to become something. Now that gets really psychological.
Yep.
But when you talk about, and I've given this example before, you want to make dinner for your wife. Why do you want to make dinner for your wife? Because it's our anniversary. Like, okay, you can advertise to somebody about meal kits, etc. Like, well, you want to do that because it's your anniversary. Like, why? And because I want to be seen as a thoughtful husband. You want to become something.
Yep.
And again, once you get to that, and that's Alan Clement's example, and I think it's fantastic because once you get to that, when you can start to get to that level of understanding the customer, the world's your oyster.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah, man. So what's the next one? What's the next one we got up?
So the next one, it really builds on this idea of making everything about the customer. And yeah, this is the one that scares everybody, right? It's give away the business.
Yeah.
But when you talk about giving away the business, what you're really talking about is that there's an aspect of generosity, right? And there's an aspect of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And those two go hand in hand, right? And so, as you make things about the customer, there's a natural lean then to actually understand what it is that your customer needs and wants at any given time. And there's context to that, right? So there's past tense context that you bring with you into that decision process, I suppose. There's also like forward leaning expectation and understanding, especially if you are, providing them with some product or a level of expertise, right, that allows them to kind of get better in the future. To your point around, what is it that they're trying to become, right? So you take what's happened in the past, you think about what's going to happen in the future, and try to be proactive about that. And what that means is that there are going to be times along the journey where, frankly, one of two things might happen, right? One is that you just have an opportunity to help. And in those moments, you can make that complicated and you can try to work it into a business model and you can try to do whatever else you need to do, or you just do the thing. And it doesn't require a thank you and it doesn't require payment necessarily or anything else. You just do it because it's the right thing. And you do it because it continues to move them along their journey, of which you fully expect to be a part of, right? So that's kind of the one side of it. And the other side of it is that, there are parts along the journey that get bumpy. And when that happens, and there are, and you sort of have to distill like, well, what just happened there, right? Was it our fault? Was it your fault? Like, I've got an answer for you. Like, it's your fault, right?
Yeah.
And again, that isn't just taking on the chin every time, right? I'm prefacing all of this with the context that, things happen jointly and one of the parties needs to step up and really, be generous, be understanding, and really lean into that. And as the organization that is producing that product, that's providing that service, like, you need to be the one to say, hey, listen, like, we're going to take care of this. We're going to make it right. We're not even going to talk about whose fault it is. Like, we're just going to make it right. And that the level of trust that builds in those moments, right? When you get back into kind of the normal rhythms of business, like, it always makes that next level of conversation that much easier.
Yeah, man. Yeah. That I love that, because essentially, saying that, like, we're going to make it right. We're going to step up and make it right. Again, it goes back to making everything about the customer. The goal, if you set your values right, you set your mission right, and organizationally you get everybody bought into, like, this is why we do this. This is what we're here for. This helps you make decisions. When you say, all right, something went down, we've got to make a decision about how we fix this, or how we address this, or if we address this. Mm-hmm. It wasn't your fault, but that the customer's not going to get the outcome that they want. When you go ahead and you do the thing because you tell them, essentially, we're going to make this right because we exist to help you get this thing. You create lifetime customers when you do things like that. When they know for a fact, like, you didn't owe them this at all. That's kind of operative word is give, right? Yep. You didn't owe it to them. But you did it anyway. You create lifetime customers doing that stuff.
There's no doubt. And what's interesting is, if you look across the organization, like, where in nearly every org are companies, always willing to kind of overspend or overcommit or go the extra mile. Well, it's always on the sales side, right? It's like, oh, you need to fly, you need to spend $3,000 on a flight to go, like, present for this RFP that we have a 3% chance of winning, like, of course, get on the flight, go do it, right? Like we might get money, right?
Right.
So, it's not like the concept of investment doesn't exist in an organization, but back to, again, all this stuff ties together. Like, okay, you're doing that for sales. And again, like I come from that world, so no hate there. I mean, sometimes you need to get your butt in an airplane and do the thing. But here's the thing. That same customer, right, that you are flying out for, that's a prospect, or maybe you're looking to do more business with an existing or whatever, but that same customer, they're still a customer when you are thoroughly engaged with them, and it's maybe the client care team that's now involved, or it's the fill in the blank team, right? Even when you talk about your product teams and how they view certain things, and some of it is what you do, and the other part of it too is the attitude that you do it with, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you and I, like, how many product companies have we been around where like there's almost this like visceral reaction to like, oh, we got to do that, and it's like, if you just take a step back and think about what a product backlog really means, right? I mean, all you're doing is you're building features or fixing bugs for future customers, right? Or for customers to use in the future. Like that's really what the backlog is.
Right.
So the idea that somebody would then like step all over a thing that you could do for an existing customer and prioritize that is almost silly. Like it's literally the same thing, right? Like it's not like it's like, well, okay, I could either give you the cupcake or I get to keep the cupcake. Like all the cupcakes are for the customer, like at the end of the day, And so it's like I have to smile sometimes when someone's like, well, that's stupid. We can't possibly prioritize that. And it's like, what's the difference?
What are you here for?
Yeah, what are you here for, right? And the difference is like, no, in one case we have a very like time box need that we think we can step into and really lean into that. In the other case, it's the backlog shifts by 3 story points or something. Like, just do the thing, right?
Yeah.
Just do it. So
do the thing, get the impact, realize the impact it's going to have on the customer relationship and customer lifetime value. Be able to make that decision. Be able to culturally have people weigh those options.
Yep.
Right.
No doubt. And one more thing I'll just throw in on this is, I think this is where, when you look left to right in an organization and you look at all the touch points along the kind of the customer life cycle, right? This does get lost, right? The way marketing views CX and a customer, the way sales may view that same set of customers, if we're being honest, the way the client team, customer success, et cetera, the way they view it. You got product mixed in there. You probably have an innovation team that's somewhere in the mix. You've got, and then you have this idea of like how you actually expand relationships with those same customers, which may or may not be the same team. And, you get into kind of account management and that sort of thing. If you look at all those groups left to right, and frankly, even, thinking about it maybe a little more, circular in terms of influence, I think it goes without saying, and yet it needs to be said somehow, that like that customer is the same company or the same individual, right? B2B, B2C, like it's the same one through the whole journey, right? So the idea that you would start to look at investing in them differently, like just using different math across that continuum is actually pretty silly, And so there's so much importance in saying like, no, like we view this particular customer this way, and we will view them that way repeatedly and consistently as they move through, so that their experience with us is consistent, but also that we're always in a position, and we put our employees, our people, in a position to do the right thing at the right time, right? That is, but it comes again, like you can't just flip a switch on the stuff. Like some of that has to exist in the org. If it doesn't, then even people, quote unquote, doing the right thing, like it might actually be unbalanced in some ways, right? Back to, sales versus client care, et cetera. So that's just something that kind of, we see that a lot out in the market, and been deeply involved with some companies and helping them to fix that. But it's like, man, you have to have that consistent view of like customer, capital C. What does that look like left to right?
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you nailed the way that you have to weave it through the whole business, and having that big capital C view of customer and that shared objective across your entire company.
Yep.
is it's not easy. It's not easy to do. But if you can get there, like I say many times, if you can get there, you can move mountains.
Yep.
Yeah, man. So what we got next, man? What's the next principle?
One of my favorites, mainly because I do it all the time. Asking dumb questions.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, so we talked a little bit about this in the last episode, so I don't want to kind of repeat all the same stuff. I'll focus on kind of two areas of why asking dumb questions is really important. And we talked about the fear of, kind of that, like you don't want to be the person that looks silly. Like everybody's, fearing embarrassment, fearing like that exists. And we talked about some ways to kind of work around that. But, there are really some practical reasons, right, for why asking dumb questions is important. So on one hand, and this is something that we see, kind of just in every industry all the time, is the idea that, when you ask dumb questions, you're also operating in like uncomfortable territory most of the time, right? And we've talked about the fact that, you told that good story about how like, after a couple of months you asked about an acronym and all of a sudden it was clear like nobody knew what that acronym meant, right? And so, it is actually really hard to innovate and to advance if people are never operating in uncomfortable zones. And asking dumb questions is a very simple way to get into those areas of not being comfortable, right? It's some of that other stuff is more complex, right? In terms of like, okay, how do I get into the uncomfortable? There are definitely things that take more practice. But listen, anybody can ask dumb questions. Yeah. Anybody can. And Safi Bacall wrote a book called Loon Shots, and it's all about transitions, right, and the importance of transitions. And his background is as a scientist, but then he's also run some pretty big biotech companies. So he's talking about it kind of in the context of organizations, but also like sort of taking scientific transitions and applying those to orgs, right? And how important transitions are. And that's where the magic happens, right? And that book particularly focuses on this idea of, loon shots in terms of things that you can do that are kind of, completely innovation based versus things that are a little more product innovation based, right? So are you trying to go deeper? Are you trying to go wider, et cetera? But one of the things that I took from that book is just the importance of, there are these points in a journey when you kind of have like, there are two things that can happen. You can either use that as an accelerant, and really change the next phase in a big way. Or you can frankly not take advantage of that moment and then feel the effects of having not done that for, the duration of the process. And so again, like this sounds like a really funny thing to say, but like asking dumb questions is a super simple way to ensure that you are not missing your opportunity to capitalize on transitions for your customer, because that is incredibly important to them, right? So the products that you build, the services that you offer, all of these things, that your customer's journey, all of that includes these periods of important transition, and you need to be able to capitalize on those by asking silly questions, sometimes getting silly answers. But you know what? Like 2 out of 5, like that ain't bad. Like if you get if 3 out of the 5 times someone's like, really, you just asked that, but 2 out of the 5 times you find out that actually nobody knew the answer, like that is more than worth asking 5 dumb questions every time. Everybody
in the room is glad you asked.
Yep.
It's one of the things they talk about in the book, in the fiction narrative. It's just, basically being willing to swing.
Yep.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the second part for me that's really, and again, there are lots of reasons for why this is important, but so I think one is just not missing your shot, right? The second is, especially for folks that are in leadership positions internally or are in positions of large influence externally, right, to the customer base. when you're willing to step out and ask the dumb questions, you're also encouraging culturally the people around you to do the same. And so for all the reasons that it's a good idea, it's a really good idea if everybody's doing it, right? And so now you kind of start to build that engine of, we always feel comfortable with each other doing that, right? And that's a big, big thing. And so it's the exponential nature of it, in addition to the fact that there are some real gains to be had.
Nailed it. So what's the last one we got, man?
Last one is doing the dirty work. Yeah, man, this is, in its simplest form, this is like, if you see something that needs to be done, do it. Right. Yeah. And again, this ties in with everything we've talked about in terms of, there are assumptions here in terms of context, past tense, visibility, future tense, understanding of what your customer is trying to achieve and why that's important, understanding of their pain points and where you can be of service to them. But at the end of the day, like, there are just things that come up in a relationship with your customers. And again, it's human to human sometimes, but it's also system to human or system to system, right? There are use cases for this that span kind of all the permutations of how you interact with your customers. But there are times as an organization where you just need to pick up the mop. And in doing that, what you're saying to your customer is, I understand how important it is for this thing to occur, for us to take this next step. I understand how important that is. And to show you that, I'm going to do this seemingly meaningless thing just to ensure that we stay on track, just to ensure that you get that next step, whatever that is, just to ensure that you don't have to take the heat, and we will, whatever that is. Like, I'm going to do that so that you see how committed I am to your cause, not to my cause, but to your cause.
That's awesome, man. I think that it's huge to be able to, one, say as an organization you want to do that. Two, to be able to culturally instill and incentivize making sure that gets done. Give the operational enablement for your people to do that. That goes for product and service companies. It just basically being able to take care of the customer and to do the dirty work, right? There are so many examples of that happening in different contexts, that once that happens, the customer looks at you differently. They look at your company as a company that's not just interested in its own bottom line, but again, going back to, you truly are all about their best interest. And there's a level of trust there that, if somebody has a lower price, I'm not willing to trade on that. I will pay more because I trust these people.
Yeah. I think 100%. And that can even show up in kind of less obvious spaces, so things around the research that you put into features or the product that you might put out there, right? Just the things you might do pre-planning and planning that show how much care you're putting into the thing that you're about to do with them, right? Like that in a lot of ways, like, that's the dirty work as well. It's preparation, but it's the thing that your competitor probably isn't doing. And it's something that, frankly, like, you probably could have gotten away with not doing, but when your customers know and understand that what that went into the work, it makes all the difference,
Absolutely,
so,
man.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely. Well, this has been awesome. I think that, clearly there are really big takeaways here. These are simple things that we're talking about. Again, we're not talking about rocket science. We're not talking about stuff that might, people might not say out of their mouths. It's a matter of how to actually apply that in your company. So, one, make everything about the customer, right? Make sure that you're not just saying those words, but you're doing that and enabling your employees to make that decision every single time. Obviously, giving away the business might scare the crap out of some people. Hopefully we explain that well enough to where you know that we mean, it's kind of Gary Vaynerchuk, give, ask, right? Be able to do the right thing at the right moment, to have that inflection point with your relationship. Be able to ask dumb questions. So many people in the room will probably think you're a hero after you do it. And then finally, obviously, you have to be willing to do the dirty work. You got to be willing to do the things that your customer looks at and says, wow, nobody else was willing to do that for me. I'm a customer for life. So, folks, we really appreciate you watching. We really appreciate you tuning in. We're very thankful for everybody who has subscribed to the show. If you haven't yet, please do so. And until next time, keep outserving your competition on your relentless pursuit to become an experienced leader. Catch you in the next one.